Welcome to Cyber909, your source for wit and wisdom in cybersecurity and beyond. On this podcast, your host, Veteran Chief Security Officer and cyber aficionado Den Jones, taps his vast network to bring you guests, stories, opinions, predictions, and analysis you won't get anywhere else. Join us for Cyber909 Episode 19 with Irfan Jafar.
Hey folks, welcome to another episode of Cyber909, your podcast for some ideally entertainment, some wit, and some wisdom. And we're actually recording this in the morning of Valentine's Day. So you are blessed because we have one of the best looking sales reps I know, Irfan Jafar. I'm going to allow Irfan you to introduce yourself. But the one thing I will tell you is we have a couple of little stories on Irfan and I and how we met and his journey as a leader. So let's get into this. Irfan, welcome to the show, and God, you're a handsome man.
Oh, man. Dan, well, first of all, thank you for having me here, and I'm really excited about this and really looking forward to our conversation today. My journey has been very interesting if you look at it, because it's very difficult to really predict where you're going to end up, right? So when I started my journey, I did not know one day I will be a leader in the SaaS world, in technology, and helping our customers with those solutions, right? But my journey started. I moved from Texas after I finished my college, and I started working in a startup company in Sunnyvale. We were doing, Windows-based and thin client computing back then, and Unix-based terminals as well, right? If you remember Windows NT servers, and I'm dating myself. But I started my first year or two more like in sales operations, and I was fascinated looking at salespeople, how they were operating and how they were helping their organization. So I wanted to move into sales, but it's funny though that somebody told me, "Hey, no, you're never gonna be successful in sales," and maybe I wasn't coming across as somebody who's just trying to sell something, and just like more of a curiosity and more of an introvert at that time, and still to a certain degree. I decided to take the journey anyway, and that was like 20 years ago or so, right? And if you fast forward, I worked at many organizations. I worked at Oracle, I worked at Talent, Riverbed, and then last 10 years or so at VMware, where I really enjoyed and really found my success and helped many customers, including when you and I met at Adobe. I know we'll touch on that. And what I was finding as an IC, as an individual contributor, that anyone can lead. Anyone can lead. You just have to have that mindset that how you can show people what we can do, how you can help them, and in the process, help yourself too, and now, and help people around you. So, I always joke about it as like, anyone can be a manager, right, but not a leader, because if you don't have followers, you're not a leader. But I'll pause here. I know you want to double a little bit, but that's what brings me here today, right? The last 3-4 years, I've been in a official manager leadership role and trying to help my organization from VMware to now Omnissa, a standalone company and a privately held company.
Yeah, and so your current role is, so you're a regional sales director at Omnissa. Do you want to explain to everybody, so where did Omnissa come from? It's a new company, but let's talk about the VMware journey and then how Omnissa spun out.
No, that's a great question, and I'll touch on everything that's publicly available as well. Right. So within VMware, at that time, my business unit was end user computing, right? And in end user computing, we care about device management, end user experience, may it be physical endpoints, your Windows, Mac, iOS, so on and so forth, and tying off it with security if somebody's running a zero trust initiative, things like that. So integrate with other products out there, and then virtual apps, virtual desktops. VDI is not a new technology, but what has happened, evolution of it. So those were the key areas where we were helping our customers with. And when Broadcom acquired VMware, our business unit ultimately was spun off, and that gave us an opportunity to be a standalone company. So everybody that was part of that business unit, or many of the folks who are part of this business unit, we are now part of Omnissa. Obviously, there has been some changes here and there, but our GM for our business unit at VMware is now our CEO at Omnissa. My role is still as a regional director, but now we're not tied to any other organization. We are a privately held organization headquartered out of Mountain View. And we're still doing the same thing, helping our customers with, end user computing, but investing more.
Yeah. And so the flagship product, is it Workspace ONE still? Is that the flagship?
Yeah, we still have the two flagship products, Workspace ONE and Horizon.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And Horizon's more like the VDI solution, is that right?
Yeah, that's
yeah.
And virtual apps.
Yeah.
Right.
It's funny sometimes I can't keep up with all the names of products and stuff because A, I'm getting old, and B, I've been doing this shit for 30 years. So for me, like VDI, I remember building out VDI Citrix on Citrix WinFrame on Windows NT 351, and I think the year was 1998.
Oh.
It was my first ever. And then when I went to Adobe in 2001, I was the guy that resuscitated 3 failed Citrix pilots and then built out their first formal Citrix infrastructure. And then I was probably one of about 3 or 4 people, maybe 3 people in IT who were really pioneering VMware. In the days before ESX could be even, clustered. It was a standalone ESX server. And I was putting domain controllers on it and Win servers and all that shit. And even Microsoft wouldn't officially support our deployment. And I remember my boss saying that to me, and he was like, "Well, what's your plan if this breaks?" I'm like, "I'll DC promo the DC down, the domain controller, and I'll rebuild it. I mean, you can just rebuild these things. I mean, you've got an ESX image, just bloody rebuild it." And then we met. So I think we met around 2017. Like, I mean, I'm maybe getting the dates muddled, but I think it was 2017.
Early 2017, yeah.
Yeah, we were doing our VMware stuff. So there was Benzi, Carlos, your team, and you guys were core to our zero trust architecture. And I'll share with everybody. Okay, right. Can
I get
yeah.
there? We became a core part of your zero trust ultimately, right? I think you were still coming up with a strategy at that time. But sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. But
no, let's go. Yeah.
Yeah.
And well, the thing was I think at that time the team were still exploring which vendors were going to be part of this solution, because there isn't, and I would say this to this day, there isn't a vendor that can, when they say they do zero trust, there's not one vendor that does all components of a holistic zero trust strategy.
Sure.
But our ZT, we were focused on users accessing apps and services regardless of the network they were on,
right,
and doing a posture check and improving the security as part of that access. And you guys, so we use VMware's VIDM, we use Workspace ONE, we used F5, and we use Okta, and we glued that shit together pretty much.
Right.
And we partnered with you guys. You guys at that time then spun a partnership with Okta and went to market with something that we all worked on. But I remember the first time you and I met, and I remember, do you know what's really funny? I don't remember shit really about all these projects and stuff, but I'll tell you one thing. I remember I was running late to meetings as always, and everybody's already meetings underway. We're sitting there. Your team's going through how brilliant your shit's going to work, like all salespeople do. And I remember I'm sitting on a filing cabinet at the corner or the back of the room. Yeah.
You had your power pose on. You were intimidating me. Yeah.
And I just remember being like, they had you got your team, your engineers had done the little dog and pony show, and it was a very impressive demo and explanation of the product and the architecture and how it all fits in.
Right.
And I had two classic lines that I'll never forget. One which I use a lot, which is your technology is very impressive, and it'll be and then I'm like, it'll be amazing if the price is $1. It'll be really shit if it's $1 million. I can't remember, but I basically throw in there because any product you ever see in your career,
Right.
it could be great, but it could be really not great if the price is not within our reach, and it will be great if it's within our reach. And so an overpriced product really kind of dulls the tone of the product. But then my classic one was, I kind of think I looked over at you and said, "I'm guessing you're the sales guy." And
I remember.
then I'm like, and I bet you drive a Porsche convertible as well and some shit. And you just looked at me and you're like, "How do you know that?" And I'm like, "I'm in security. That's my job to know. It's not my job to know this stuff."
That was funny. Like, I'm like, all right, so here am I driving my old Porsche, which I didn't pay a lot of money for, but perception is reality. And I'm like, oh
Yep.
my God, I'm meeting with my or at least not my client, but you part of that group for the first time. And I don't know what type of impression I'm making after what he just said, because he saw me in the parking lot, and I'm like, oh, but time out. I only paid like
Yeah. The
small amount
funny the
for it.
funny thing was I didn't reveal in that meeting until later that's how I knew you were driving the Porsche, because you had driven into the parking lot as I was walking past.
Right.
You didn't know who I was. I didn't know who you were. I don't know if you saw me or not, but I saw you driving in, and I'm like, and at that time you had this really big head of hair, like your hair's pulled back right now, but
Yeah.
this impressive, good looking guy, big hair, looking like you mean business. And I remember when I saw you driving in and thinking, I bet he's a sales guy.
Oh
And
man.
then we sat in that room and I was like, oh, this is genius. Now, funnily enough, though, when I speak to my team, and there's people in my team I really respect, and they're good friends to this day, Carlos and all these guys. And I just remember Carlos being like, Irfan's good people. And I think the thing for me is, and this is what I wanted to kind of dig into next, sales and salespeople and sales strategy and philosophy and mindset. When
Mm.
I think of a good salesperson, it's and I've said this to a lot of people. I don't have a lot of salespeople in my life that I would answer the phone if they called. It's about maybe a dozen, and in 30 years, that's not a big number. But the one thing that they all have in common is building relationships and building trust. So why don't you share, you're a leader of a big team. Why don't you share the philosophies and the culture and how you try and
Yeah.
groom and mentor people to be good sales leaders or good sales executives?
Yeah. So I don't even look at it as that I'm in sales and I should be selling a whole bunch of product. I see that as a function of, if you do the right things, that happens, right? And I read this book many years ago. It's called Go Giver. So you got to have that go giver type of mentality, right? And that starts with also showing some curiosity. In our meeting as well, like I was really curious at the time, like what is it that uh, Dan and the team are trying to achieve? Jokes being aside, right? And that was fun. And I carried to this day, and even before that time as well, where uh, put sales aside, you just try to figure out, okay, what is it that person, that group is trying to achieve, what problem they're trying to solve, what goals that they're trying to hit, and how you fit in and how you can help. So when you lead with curiosity and you lead with that mindset, um, and then you also show up the right way. You got to show up prepared. You gotta then live up to what you're gonna say to them, right? So we're gonna go in. We're leading with curiosity. We're asking you all these questions. We may not have all the answers that day, but if I'll say, let me find out how we can help. then I have to come back and let you know what we can, what we cannot do. It sounds very simple, right? How many people consistently stay true to their promise? Like, hey, I'm going to do this, and they don't come back. So I think, if in my mind at least, and the philosophy I have with my team as well, right? If you lead with curiosity, and if you're really thinking about how we can help somebody, and forget that you're a salesperson, you're gonna be able to build trust with the other side, right? So and then when you build that trust, then relationships just happen, right? You cannot just fake a relationship by giving fake compliments or taking somebody to a game or expensive dinner. Those things can happen, naturally, but don't try to trick people. I don't like that. And and that's my philosophy back then. That's my philosophy now as a leader of the team, and that's the tone that I'd like to set. But then I also like to take the approach where, as a leader, you should have a servant mentality mindset. Roll up the sleeves and see how you can help them, how you can help remove roadblocks. But you also have to keep the folks accountable, and I'm big on accountability as well, both my accountability or anybody in the organization. And that's pretty much it. I mean, I can expand on it a little bit more, but that's the core piece of leadership in my mind.
Yeah, I mean, one thing when I think of you, I mean, there is the joke about how we met, but ultimately, when we were partnering together, I felt that I could trust you. You'd done what you said you would do. There was no bullshit. The honesty and the credibility was established very early in the relationship, and collectively our teams delivered. And I don't even remember, like, I don't do a lot of vendor dinners. I intentionally didn't do that. I certainly, before you done a deal, I wouldn't do a vendor dinner because I felt that was disingenuous, right, from an integrity perspective. After the deal, sometimes, but more importantly, I would actually say, well, wait till we're successful. The dinner's the celebration of our success together.
Right.
And then we continue from there. But I know a lot of salespeople that, unless they can take people to games and dinners and stuff like that, they don't know how to sell. And when COVID hit, I could watch a bundle of salespeople just crumble because they didn't know, because the only tool in their toolkit was, let me wine you and dine you. And it's like, fuck,
Right. Yeah, I mean, you touch on on a few good things. I'll unpack it a little bit. What I heard, like, celebration is, from a sales standpoint. Don't think about, hey, we closed a large deal and now we have to go celebrate with the customer. But from a customer standpoint, the work just starts now, and that's what you're right. Until we see success in what we both agreed to. After that, then we can go and celebrate. But just because somebody signed a contract with you, that's not the moment to high five and celebrate, because the real work starts now. Unless, I mean, if they're just doing renewal extension is the technology they've already. But if you're rolling out new initiatives, the real work starts after you have inked that contract. And I did see a lot of people in COVID, and especially in sales, even as a leader, I remember, I would hear from other leaders saying that, hey, my reps are saying that I don't know how to really sell right now because I'm not able to take my clients out for dinner or games and whatnot. And I always thought that those are, things that should just, if they're happening, that's fine. If they're not happening, it's fine as well. Nobody's really stopping you to the things that I said earlier, right? You can still talk to the individual. You can still figure out, but why this, why that, why are you doing this? Where do you want to go? Lead with why, as they say too, right? Everybody knows about it, but a lot of people don't practice. It's the temptation of just doing the wrong thing is so much easier sometimes, right? And other aspects of life too, and we'll touch on that later.
Yeah.
Not just sales. So I think it's easier said than done is what it is.
Yeah. And it's funny you mentioned the why business because I was listening to an audiobook because I hate reading, but five whys. We're talking about business strategy, marketing, and sales. And then there's like why. And like why does your company exist? Why do you want to sell to people? And I'm spending time on that area because I've been a recipient of this stuff, a practitioner for years. So all of a sudden now I'm on the other side where I'm now selling. I'm trying to sell. I actually, it's not a muscle which I'm familiar with. And it's funny because I've reached out to you and a bunch of other sales friends. Like I say, it's a small list, but I'm always asking, and trying to understand like what made you guys successful, and the common theme across everybody is this whole concept of we're building relationships. It's not the short sale, it's the long game. I mean, the theme that I got from everybody is all about I've got a career in sales. I'm a career salesperson. Selling you this one deal might not happen, but let's keep the relationship, build the relationship, and make friends. I mean, the reality is not all your friends, not all these good relationships are always going to buy from you.
Right.
But your reputation and your brand actually spreads across the industry and across, in our case, the valley here. So I think in any business context, building your brand, building relationships, and for me, trustworthy. I've got a reputation of getting shit done. I mean, we delivered really consistently. So where does brand sit for you and your team?
Yeah. So, and if you're talking about personal brand, right? In this case,
There's personal. There's I'd say personal and team brand.
yeah, personal and team brand, but not the company product brand.
Not the company, not the product. So not brand marketing or product marketing.
Yeah, I think you touched on a few things, and again, it's the definition of some of those things as well, right? And then I'll touch on brand. When you talk about building a relationship with others, what I find, and this is over many years, in talking to people, collecting data, is like everybody has a different interpretation of these words. You say, hey, you got to build relationship with your customers, or you got to build relationships internally, externally, but you have to double click on it and make sure that people are on the same page, what that means. So what we were talking about earlier, like when people are just, taking somebody to game or, expensive dinner, that's not relationship building. Those things can happen as part of it naturally, but you got to understand relationship building is that you have to be there for that person when you are committing to something. You have to show up. You have to do what you say, and not just in sales, right? So it's internal, external, and how you can help them, how they can help you. So the definition is important. And once you have the foundation and the good interpretation of these words and the definition, the brand piece is really important. And what is brand? It's about, okay, how you show up, how do people see you? And if you're going to live the right way, people will see it. As they say, your action speaks louder than words. You cannot force yourself into that. Hey, I'm gonna have a great brand. I'm gonna go start telling people, oh, trust me, or I'm gonna, I've done beautiful things here and I've done wonderful things here, and this is why I'm so great. So you cannot really go and create your brand as such as well, right? So you have to lead by example. And then when it comes to the team brand, of course, as a leader, you lead by example, and then your team sees it, but then you also help them, coach them, how you build your brand. And I have explicit conversations with my team member, like, okay, I'm going to help build your brand, but don't think of it as a negative thing. Building brand means that you have a lot of work to do as well. It's not going to be just, I'm trying to get you spotlight may it be our sales kickoff or any other event, just for the wrong reasons. You have to put the work. But if you put the work, don't, and if you've really done wonderful things, then don't be afraid to share that with others, because it's not self-promotion, it's helping others. It's the go-giver mentality, because now you have an opportunity to help the a larger team. And so that's how I see brand, and I think brand is a critical piece. Your brand, your team brand, and how you're seen internally and externally.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I've been trying to get. There's a brand coach that we used at Adobe. I pulled her in at Cisco, and we're hoping to get her on the show, because one thing I learned is you can be conscious about your brand and drive and manage your brand, or like a lot of people in the world, you don't even think about it. You all have a brand. How people think of you, that's your brand. So we all have one.
Right.
But do you want to be in control of it, or do you want to just meander through your life? Now,
Yeah.
you also mentioned there was two things I picked up on. One, sales kickoff. You and I, you've managed to have I guess your organization have me jump on a little stage with your team, and we'll talk on that sales kickoff about selling to executives, selling to CISOs and CIOs, what matters. I've done a few of those with quite a few vendors over the years, and I always get excited to sit there and share with salespeople, because I am so vocal about what pisses me off and what excites me about salespeople, right?
Right.
And
Right.
I think it's good for me to sit there if I'm that upfront about it. Well, hey, it's good for me to sit there with salespeople and tell them like what I do think is good and what I think is not so good.
Yeah.
And then I'm also a member of the CISO Society, and there's a Slack channel with 1,400 CISOs. So
Wow.
some of the questions for that SKO, I'm sending their way to try and get some, other ideas or thoughts from other people, because maybe I'm just a hard ass. Now, you mentioned life. So outside of work, I look at it like a high performing professional, regardless of what we do in our career. There's a balance between healthy mind, healthy body, so
Mhm.
that enables us to
Right.
really go and excel in our roles, our profession. So when you think of that, what does that make you think of, and how do you keep your brain and body all healthy? Because you're a fit guy. So what do you do there?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And then, what you also find, that your personal life and your professional life are so tightly connected, right? And how you show up in your personal life trickles over your business life, and vice versa. You were touching on earlier about brand, and I'm going to get into how what do I do outside of work and fitness. Uh, it starts with end in mind, right? Using Stephen Covey's line, and I've mentioned this in other podcasts as well. So even if you're building your brand, starts with end in mind. You need to know where you're going, where you want to be. So going back to staying healthy, staying fit, gotta have a vision. Like, okay, this is where I want to be, and then you have to have enough discipline to execute on your vision. But if you're not gonna have a vision, then it's going to be very difficult for you to do the hard things, because staying fit, staying healthy, uh, does not get you immediate benefit in one day, right? It's this consistent effort that you have to put in, and it's like hitting a rock 100 times. The 101 hit will break the rock, but it's the first 100 hits that you took did all the work. So workout, staying healthy, eating healthy, it's all about doing things consistently, and then things start to compound, right? The book about atomic habits,
Mm-hmm.
the author talks about that as well. And I was talking about Stephen Covey earlier about beginning with end in mind. So I take that approach with the end in mind, and then it makes it a lot easier for me to, hey, how soon I'm gonna get up and work out, because I know why I'm doing it, and I also understand that it's small increments every day, and that's what forces me to eat and eat healthy, stay healthy. Because a lot of things that I do are not easy for me either, right? People say, I don't know how you do it. I'm like, okay, well, it's difficult for me as well. Now it gets maybe incrementally easier when your body adapts to that. That's true. But at the end of the day, we all are human, right? And I try to make sure that I know what the end in mind is, but I look at end in mind in two different ways: the good ending and the bad ending, because it's not just the reward that will motivate you. And Dr. Huberman talked about it with one of his guests, where you also have to think about the what if, and things will look really bad, but what do
Mhm.
you do to prevent that? So in my mind, prevention is the key to a lot of.
Yeah. It's funny, right? Because I'll draw the parallel to say, like in cybersecurity, you could pay for it now and be proactive, or
Mhm.
you can pay a lot more later when you're reactive. And when I translate that into health, I think of it like you're going to pay at some point. Pay now or pay later.
Yeah.
Because if I don't have good exercise and a
Yeah.
good mind and body,
Hmm.
then at some point I'm going to be in a world of hurt. I'd say I'm speaking from some level of experience where
Hmm.
from a stress, and I'd say personal stress, and bad habits and stuff led me to be you know going under surgery that wasn't ideal at the age of 48. And I look at it like, holy shit, I'm paying for this.
Right.
I'm paying for a series of decisions. The other thing I think you're kind of getting at is discipline and consistency.
Hmm.
So if you become consistent, it becomes easier. If you're disciplined, then you'll start. Most people, subconsciously, we don't like change, and change is painful, or I'd say uncomfortable. And I think the minute you start to make the change, then gradually over time, what I'm paraphrasing and taking away from what you said there is, it becomes easier over time because it becomes the new habit, it becomes a new normal.
Hmm.
Not to say that it's ever easy,
Right.
but if you know why you're doing it, then yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah.
um when I think of you, I think of someone who's disciplined in their personal life and professional life. What piece of advice would you give either your younger self or actually aspiring new people in sales?
Right. No, I mean that's a great question, because hindsight is obviously 2020, and there's so much advice you can give to your younger self. I started this podcast talking about when I first was getting into sales. There was a senior individual in our organization at that time telling me, hey, you're not going to be successful in sales. And it did impact me a little bit. It shook me a little bit because I had nothing to show for as far as sales is concerned. So uh, for a short period of time, it impacted my confidence, right? Uh, but what I learned that over time is the belief in yourself is more powerful than others telling you that it cannot be done, right? But you have to put the work. Of course, we talked about that. So if you and you have to be prepared to fail,
Mhm.
fail forward, as they say, right? And there's so many examples of athletes, right? They fail so much, and then they find success, right? The shots they practice in the gym, they'll probably miss a lot more, and then when the actual game is happening, right? So the advice to younger self would be believe in yourself. And the folks listening in who are starting in their career earlier, just believe in yourself, but put the work. There's a lot of emphasis
Mhm.
on work less, but I think you know put the effort, work on your craft.
Mhm.
Uh, and become the best version that way, become the best version of yourself that way. So that's the advice I'll give to my younger self. I don't know what was the other part of the question. I forget.
Well, I think and that's really the same version of it, which is what advice would you give, to people you're mentoring,
Right.
which I think you kind of touched on. What's the best piece of advice that you've received in your career?
Yeah, I mean, that's over the years I've received many advices that are, I carry forward with me, and it's hard to just kind of pin down to one. I'm sure you kind of struggle with that as well. If you just have to distill down to one, and you feel like that, okay, no, just do all.
No, by the way, it's a shitty question, because you're like, wait a minute, just one piece?
Just one piece. I think it kind of goes back to my earlier comment and the advice that I'm giving to others, right? Which is, you have to believe in yourself. But again, it's the interpretation of those words, because we hear so much is overused. But I expand it with, believe in yourself, but you have to put the work.
Yeah.
You have to put the work, because you believe in your future self. You have that end in mind, that this is what I'm going to be. So put the effort, do all the things that are required to do to become that person. But believe in yourself that you can do it. Believe in yourself that you have it in you. Believe in yourself that you will become that the best version of yourself that you aspire to be. So the advice that I got over many years from many leaders and people in my personal life as well is you gotta believe in yourself.
Yeah.
And
one
not ground shattering, right? It's just like you hear it so many times, but I've heard it too, and I take it to heart. Yeah.
And you and I, you and I are big believers in a positive mindset and stuff. So the reality is and I would twist the word, it's like fail many times. I can't remember, was it maybe Steve Jobs that said this, is you're not failing, you're learning.
Right.
Because the reality is we're not going to get things right all the time. And someone who's just learning their craft,
right,
has to. In nature, you're learning your craft, which means at the very beginning, you're not very good at your craft. You're just learning. So think of someone playing the guitar. I'm a musician. I don't play guitar actually, but someone playing guitar, the first time they pick a guitar up, they don't know how to bloody play guitar. Mm-hmm. So practice, be disciplined and put the effort in. And if you practice at your craft, then you can become an expert, in this case, guitar player, in your case, sales professional, in my case, whatever it is I do, I don't know.
Right.
So Irfan, we're ticking down the minutes. We're over. I always try and do the 30-minute thing, and then some days I'm like, oh shit, it's an hour later. So I really appreciate your time. I appreciate your support, your mentorship, your guidance, not just for me, but for those around you. We've had success together. I see in the future, hopefully we'll have more success together. Irfan, thank you very much, man. I appreciate it. And hopefully we'll get you on the podcast again soon, and we can talk about maybe the continued journey and what's next for you in the career. Thanks, man.
Dan, thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it, and looking forward to it, and many more conversations that we will have down the road. Thank you so much.
Excellent. Thanks, bud. See ya.
Okay.
Thanks for listening to Cyber909. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and don't miss an episode of your source for wit and wisdom in cybersecurity.